Dallas Police Chief David Brown introduced President Obama at the memorial ceremony today, and people are still talking about his comments yesterday while briefing the press on the investigation of the killing of 5 of his officers, and also about his, well, very unique personal story. Now, the chief has dealt with a lot of tragedy. Shortly after he became chief, his son shot and killed a police officer in a neighboring town, and also killed another man in the process. Police wound up killing the chief's son, David Brown Jr. His partner, the chief's, was killed back in '83, and 8 years later, his younger brother was killed by drug dealers in Arizona. Now, here's what the chief had to say to the Black Lives Matter protesters.
Become a part of the solution. Serve your communities. Don't be a part of the problem. We're hiring. We're hiring.
Here is also how the chief feels about the state of policing today.
We're asking cops to do too much in this country. We are. We're just asking us to do too much. Every societal failure, we put it off on the cops to solve. Not enough mental health funding. Let the cop handle it. Not enough drug addiction funding. Let's give it to the cops. Here in Dallas, we got a loose dog problem. Let's have the cops chase loose dogs. Policing was never meant to solve all those problems. And I just ask for other parts of our democracy, along with the free press, to help us.
I see you nodding along. You agree with him. Is today's officer dealing with stuff that maybe a generation ago they weren't?
Well, it's difficult to say. First thing is, what he did say, he was spot on in it. The police officers deemed as a subject matter expert in all aspects of society. But the way that I see it is this. The police officer is mainly there to troubleshoot or triage, if you want to refer to it as that. You see, this is what the situation is. Understand, as a police officer, you're not the subject matter expert. You triage it and you farm it out accordingly. When he mentioned in connection with the people, the application process, I wholeheartedly agree with that. If you want to deem yourself as a change agent in that organizational structure, then that's one of the key factors, one of the key focuses that you should have. Because one of the main complaints is the disproportionately poor treatment towards African Americans, and that's when we hear this term Black Lives Matter. So he says, look, if you feel so bad about it, take a job, sign up with us. But you mentioned another thing. You mentioned a lot of the tragedies that existed in the chief's life. Tragic, terrible. However, one thing I do commend him for is he made the narrative about the officers that passed away, the officers that were shot. It wasn't about him, because this could have easily encompassed the situation that department is going through. And I really commend him as the avid professional in sidestepping that and putting these dead officers at the forefront.
You know, Scott, I was looking back and I said, you know, he was county exec for 20 years in a very diverse county with a lot of interesting constituencies. You had a tragedy of an African-American mentally ill man, I believe it was late 2011, and there was an investigation and the officer was eventually acquitted. How much tension was around, I think it was the Gillis case, right, or the Gillies case. How much tension surrounded that, and what happens in the immediate aftermath where people say, I wonder if he was white, if he'd be dead?
You know, that question always comes up. And Rockland really is unique because they're different communities. It's not just one community that's black or Asian or Latino. I mean, we're all over the place. And I think, and Dominic would probably know as much, but I think there's a lot of tension there about exactly what happened and what have you. But I must say, 2011 is not 2016, to Dominic's point earlier. The video, you know, of showing these things has made dramatic what is happening in America, and it's becoming so real. So I think even then it wasn't the pitch that I think now. And one other thing I think is interesting to note, having a black president, an African American president, I don't think is helpful at all, because people view him more divisively than they would somebody else.
And also a miracle worker.
He's he's very articulate. And I think he almost acknowledged that in a way today by saying, "Look, it's not my talk. It's what you eventually do." I don't know, Dominic. Do you remember that case?
Well, one, I applaud you, county exec, for what you're saying about Obama, because he's in a no-win situation period, no matter how you look at this. But Richard, what I just want to reflect back to, I understand you guys are on the ground, law enforcement, pastor, but I agree with everything what the chief said about we're throwing too much at police officers. Straight out of grad school, 1985, I'm assigned to cover the Eleanor Bumpers case. I don't know anything about anything, scared to death. I'm at Bronx Court. They showed the autopsy photos. I looked, it was a mentally ill grandmother. The cop said that he was lunging at her with a knife. First shotgun blast blew her arm off. I had never seen an autopsy picture like that with a woman's arm blown completely off. Went into the bathroom, vomited, and did not. So I've been scarred from, and that was the case. And that case was the change nationally for how police deal with the mentally ill. Now they try and get an emergency
policy.
Right,
But
right.
Dominic, not to cut you off, but this is something that people don't want to hear. Use of force is always ugly. There's no way that you can package use of force and present it in a way that people can accept it. If someone walked into a church and assassinated 10 nuns with an AK-47, and then you saw a police officer come in directly behind that individual, point a shotgun to that individual's head and blow his head off, you're gonna have people that state that, was there an alternative means?
Well, they even asked that question in Dallas about the use of the robot in the bomb.
With the explosive.
I want to ask you a question. You have a son. If your son came to you tonight and said, "Dad, you know what? I want to be a cop," what would you say?
Well, it's a little different because my son has epilepsy. But if that's what he wanted to do, I would say, son, we can't, because you know I have a problem with black crime, that it's a real issue.
Black on black crime.
Black, not just black on black crime, but in particular, because see, when Bratton talks about the murder rate in New York City of blacks killing other blacks, Pastor deals with this much more than I do, but that's a problem. And it's real. When you're out there stealing some old black woman's purse and doing harm to people, that's real, and that shapes the perception of the police officers that have to respond. And so that's what the president is talking about. We cannot pretend that everything is lovely in our community and that there's no reason why the cops are not aggressive. So I would say to my son, yeah, basically what you said. Don't just sit and criticize. Be part of the solution. Join the NYPD.
I want to play another clip from the president, and then I want to get the Reverend's reaction to it. This again was President Obama earlier today in Dallas.
As a society, we choose to underinvest in decent schools. We allow poverty to fester so that entire neighborhoods offer no prospect for gainful employment. We refuse to fund drug treatment and mental health programs. We flood communities with so many guns that it is easier for a teenager to buy a Glock than get his hands on a computer or even a book. And then we tell the police, you're a social worker, you're the parent, you're the teacher, you're the drug counselor. We tell them to keep those neighborhoods in check at all costs and do so without causing any political blowback or inconvenience. Don't make a mistake that might disturb our own peace of mind. And then we feign surprise when periodically the tensions boil over.
You know, Pastor, I'm sure you must have stories that have broken your heart. But a young person who comes in, you see them grow up in your congregation, and then they're either no longer with us or they're serving a life sentence or something else somewhere. The President talked about a lot of problems. I don't think anyone at this table disagrees with any of them that are real. But if there was one way to maybe change this narrative, not just about an honest conversation about race, but changing the lives of some of the communities that we keep seeing this stuff happen in, what would it be?
Well, first of all, I would say that there's a lot going on in the community. Let's not despair. There's a lot of good things going on. A lot of people are taking positive initiatives to try to change things. Not enough, but there's a lot.
I don't think we ought to be discouraged.
Is it generational or not?
No, it's not generational. It's not generational. I think there are a lot of people who recognize the problem in our communities, recognize the problem in the society, and are trying to come up with alternatives. And I could give you a list of the marvelous activities that are going on by blacks and whites to try to address this problem. We've got to do more. That's what we got to do. We got to do more, and we got to resolve. And we cannot focus on the people who are haters. We cannot fix the haters. We got to become positive on doing positive things. Those of us who know what's right, who feel that unity and peace in America is what's best for America, we got to do what's right. And we got to stand for that, and we can't over-amplify the people who are haters, who are cynics, we don't want to exaggerate them, whether they be black or white. We can't exaggerate it. We got to find a positive way to improve this society by investing ourselves in the most minute conversation, on the golf course, in the boardroom, when other people aren't watching, when we're not on the television show, in personal conversations. We got to challenge each other to be the best that we can be.
You get a sense that there's a window of opportunity here where America's willing to at least listen or talk. But I've seen no thing, not to be negative or pessimistic, Andrew, but every time we try and have an honest dialogue, it always gets hijacked and goes into directions here where, something will be said stupid online, and then all of a sudden we'll get off in that tangent. I saw a football player today with a cartoon that he tweeted out of a cop getting executed, and that became the point of the dialogue instead of it just being a knucklehead doing it. I don't know, in the day of social media, how we can have a national town hall on this, a real one.
I think we can start to address some of the issues on the surface, some of the things that are most pressing, protecting our police, trying to keep people safe while they're in contact with the police. There may be some things that we can do or we can have that part of the conversation. But we're talking about the deeper issues within communities, the lack of investment that the president and that the police chief both mentioned. I don't think we're anywhere ready for that conversation, especially in an election year where everybody's divided both in terms of party and on the role of government. And to me, that's the essential missing element from all of this. We're looking for investment in communities, but these communities need help to form some of the structures that and fill some of the gaps that are
the hardest conversation
and government doesn't do that anymore.
Take the government out for 1 second. I agree with everything you said, but how about the family unit, right? I'm sure you talk about that Sunday after Sunday. Is that fixable, or have you kind of thrown your hands up and say, let's deal with it the way it is? And
we address it all the time. We address it all the time, the family unit. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of good things going on. A lot of wonderful things are happening. A lot of young people in college going for it. There's a lot good. The problem is that America's got to step back and own. I don't think America's really ever owned the role it has played in fostering racial divide in this country. I think America's got to own it. Stop fighting it, because it's legitimate. It's not going to go away. We'll be here again unless we own that there is a racial bias in America that people continue to live with, that continues to show up in jobs, in police protection, in educational opportunity. It continues to show up.
Oh, I'll tell you.
And if we don't own that, there'll be no solution.
If we're talking honestly, the conversations I've heard were people who themselves, I'm talking about white folk, who themselves say, I'm not racist, this is exaggerated. I know what you're saying is right. It's like there needs to be, like we apologize to the Japanese that were interned after World War II, something formal. I don't know what it is. I don't think reparations or anything are ever going to happen. But, and Scott, it's tough. I don't know how it's done. But something has to happen, because I think wishing it away, like what happened on how this country was formed and everything else that went along with it, I don't know who's ready to have it. And I'm just surprised if with this president and his skill set in terms of communication, we haven't moved. Not that it was his job to do it. I don't know how optimistic we are that the next person could. But
just quickly say this. Do you know that, unfortunately, the president's election brought out more hostility and language?
And I would never have believed, but you're right. Yep. It certainly has gotten uglier. Guys, thank you very much. When we come back, we will pivot to politics. He finally gave up and finally gave his support to Hillary Clinton. The question is, how much is that going to help him?